Hello, my name is Lauren Owen, and I am the Education Project Manager at Tech Unlimited. Today, we're going to be talking about redesigning lesson planning with AI, Chatbot for SEL-First creative tech teaching. We'll be going over who we are, our initial approach, why we decided to pivot, what we ultimately built, and then our next steps. So who are we? Tech Unlimited is a nonprofit that supports neurodiverse students through creative technology, computer science thinking, and social emotional learning. Here we help our students use technology as a tool for self-expression, confidence building, and work readiness virtually and in person in downtown Brooklyn. We serve students ages 10 to 24. Most have an IEP or 504 plan. They're often diagnosed with autism, ADHD, or learning disabilities, and they may attend specialized schools or DOE programs. So our students are really brilliant, they're creative and they're capable, but sometimes educational systems, traditional ones, don't often meet their needs. And that context matters because everything we do here at Tech Unlimited, from our curriculum to our programs and tools, has to be responsive with real people with real differences. So to do this, we ground all of our work in established frameworks and pedagogies like universal design for learning, social emotional learning, explicit instruction, connected learning, design thinking, because these are not buzzwords for us. They actively shape how we structure lessons, how we scaffold activities, and how we build relationships with our learners. And this approach has worked. I like it. We've been able to reach hundreds of students across dozens of programs, but more importantly, it shaped how we think about design. We want to make sure we're prioritizing learner experience, flexibility, and agency. So we started this project with a simple question: how can Tech Unlimited better support neurodiverse youth using our established frameworks and pedagogies? And our first answer was, let's create LEV, a free online resource hub to help educators confidently teach neurodiverse youth and embed our social emotional learning curriculum. And we really thought this would be a great idea to really show our different approaches, to give teachers an opportunity to use ready-to-use lessons, practical teaching strategies, and really our curated resources. And educators liked it. They liked having access to these materials. They liked those grounded in our supportive frameworks. But we soon realized that, we needed more. Like having static resources, even if they were very high quality, was not enough. Teachers needed something more adaptive, more responsive, and more embedded into their workflows. So we decided to pivot. And we also noticed that teachers were already experimenting with GenAI tools. So we thought, how could this be a way that we're able to meet those needs? But of course, you have to start with some research. So we looked into some stats about what educators were actually doing and their sentiments towards GenAI. So we saw that 60% report using it for some part of their work, 54% have used at least once in lesson plan preparation, but only 20% use it on a weekly basis at least. And then we're also seeing that 60% of people who use it monthly say it improved their lesson quality, 80% says it saves time preparing to teach, and 79% says it saves time when adapting materials. And that gap is really important between adoption and impact, because this suggests the problem isn't capability, but probably alignment. How can we better align GenAI tools with how teachers actually think, plan, and make decisions for their classes? We also had to look at the pros and cons. So we saw, of course, it could be very efficient, it could help brainstorming and personalization, but we also saw that it could limit higher order thinking, which would be focusing more on memorization rather than critical analysis or evaluation. It could be misaligned with standards, and also it could make teachers editors instead of designers. And we don't want our educators to become supervisors of automated systems. They are the creators of learning experiences for our students. And we wanted to make sure whatever we came up with respected that and really just kept encouraging it. So instead of asking, how do we build a chatbot, we asked, where specifically could intervention improve the experience? And we identified 4 areas: build, prompt, output, and refinement. In the build phase, where we're starting to develop the resources and requirements, we can embed our pedagogy into the system, actually having it rely on it. We could define boundaries and guardrails and really stick to appropriate use. We could make sure the resources were educator approved and decide that we should prioritize reflection rather than speed. In prompting, where we're seeing how teachers actually interact with AI, we could make sure that our bot actually wants context, getting that information from teachers about who their students are, how much time they have, and other constraints before providing any outputs. We could encourage reflection. We could also support educators who are unsure of how to use AI and try to reduce cognitive load through guided questions. And then the output, we want to make sure that they prioritize our pedagogy in the correct formats, embedding prompts for reflection within the responses, outputs that the AI is giving off, and also have some accessibility and differentiation suggestions in there. And lastly, refinement. We could encourage teachers to customize it. We could provide checkpoints to make sure, hey, is this aligning with what you need? We support iteration rather than one and done. And also just, again, reinforcing reflective practice. And that's how the LEV AI chatbot was born. It is an additional tool within our online resource hub that is supposed to be less of a content generator and more of your instructional design partner. It's built on our curated resources from Tech Unlimited. Its SEL-First and accessibility principles are embedded in there. We ask guided questions. We include reflections. We suggest different strategies. And we also really encourage editing and iteration. We built LEV using PlayLab. It is a ed tech platform that allows you to create AI products. And we chose it specifically because it lets you establish guardrails, curate your knowledge sources, define behaviors, and set your audience context. And also specify your chat workflow. So here's just some screenshots of what that interface looks like on PlayLab. So you're able to actually really go in and get very specific about what you need. Like ours is lots of steps going in, okay, ask who their students are, ask what their context is, give a list of all the SEL options based off of the CASEL resources that we may use, give a list of these different creative technologies that they could offer. So really give teachers opportunity to have recognition rather than recall. And then we have our beta version that you see here. So we see that the chatbot starts. Are you ready? Yes. And then the first question that prompts is, what is the age group of your students? You'd input that information and it's generating that, it's processing it. And from there, it is going to ask, what social emotional skill would you like to work on? Giving users the option to type in whichever number that corresponds to it or type the whole thing out. And then after, it's going to prompt for what technology you want to use, and then give different options for outputs for them to choose from, for them to integrate into their classes. So at the end of the month, we'll be available to educators to test, refine, and help us improve to make this something better. So in closing, at Tech Unlimited, we started with a question about supporting neurodiverse youth. We used that data and research to identify a real gap facing our educators. We created and refined LEV as a response, and now we're continuing this work through real educator feedback. So if you're interested in learning more about LEV or becoming a beta tester, please scan this QR code, and I'll also drop a link in the chat. Thank you.